Part 1, The Long Road South. The summer of 1987 was supposed to be the last normal summer for 10-year-old Caleb Marin. He didn't know that, of course, kids never do. All he knew was that school had ended in late May, and his father, Daniel Marin, had come up with the idea of a road trip. A real one. Just the two of them. No mom. No older brother. No neighbors. No hotels. Just a rusted-out 1974 Chevy van with 2 sleeping bags in the back, 2 coolers of sandwiches and soda, and a road atlas with coffee stains on the cover. They would be driving south from their home in rural Nebraska, cutting across Kansas and into the high plateaus of New Mexico, ending at Carlsbad Caverns, a place Daniel remembered from his own boyhood. That was the plan. Caleb was excited in the way only a child with little context for the world could be. He liked the idea of truck stops, of buying candy with change, of watching the clouds move across the endless flat sky, of asking for milkshakes in places where nobody knew him. He didn't yet understand that the trip was Daniel's way of running from something. Or maybe toward something. It would take Caleb years to even realize there had been a reason behind the trip. They left on a Tuesday morning. June 16th. The van made strange noises when it hit 60 miles per hour, but Daniel didn't seem concerned. He smoked with the windows open and kept the radio dialed to static-filled country music stations, which he'd sing along with half-heartedly. By the second day, they were in western Kansas. Daniel let Caleb take pictures with the Polaroid camera, not because he was sentimental, but because he thought it would keep the boy quiet. Caleb took pictures of cows. A sign that said "World's Largest Prairie Dog." His own shadow against the dusty van. It was the third night when things began to shift. They had turned off the main highway in search of a campground Daniel had marked in the atlas, a place near the foothills that was supposed to be cheap and uncrowded. But either he misread the map or the roads had changed, because after 2 hours of bumping down dirt roads flanked by nothing but dry grass and scattered fence posts, they found themselves at a clearing that wasn't marked at all. It wasn't really a campground, more like an overgrown picnic area. There was an old concrete table, cracked and mossy. A rusted trash barrel. And something that looked like the remains of a fire pit, full of long cold ash and damp cigarette butts. Daniel cut the engine and stepped out. He looked around, muttered, "This'll do," and pulled a beer from the cooler. Caleb didn't like the place. There was no reason for it, the sky was the same sky, the grass the same grass. But something about the silence felt different here. Thicker. He took more pictures before the light faded. One of the tree line. One of the van. One of his father's back as he stared at nothing. And then, just before dusk, he pointed the camera toward the woods, where he thought he saw movement. He clicked. The film slid out with a soft whir. He waited. The picture developed slowly, and what appeared wasn't what he expected. There was no girl. Not then. What developed was just the trees. Bare. Twisted. A glint of something pale among the trunks. Maybe a scrap of paper, maybe a trick of light. Nothing his 10-year-old mind lingered on. He tucked the picture into the bag with the others and went back to the van. That night, it rained. Caleb woke in the dark to the sound of it tapping the roof. He heard his father breathing heavily beside him. And then, something else. A high, almost imperceptible sound. A voice. Whispering. He turned over quickly, heart in his throat, but his father didn't stir. Outside, the whispering stopped. Caleb told himself it was the rain in the trees. That's what he told himself. But he didn't sleep again. The rain had passed by morning. The trees steamed in the sun, and everything smelled of wet soil and sap. Daniel muttered about the road turning to mush and drank instant coffee straight from the thermos, his shirt half-buttoned and his hair matted flat on one side. Caleb didn't say much. He hadn't slept. His mind kept returning to the sound, not just the whisper, but the tone of it. Like someone had spoken directly into his ear, but from very far away. They packed up quickly and got back on the road, tires struggling through the mud before the dirt turned to gravel, and gravel turned back to cracked two-lane highway. Neither of them said goodbye to the strange little campsite. 3 hours later they reached the town of Eldorado. It wasn't on the map, and there were no proper road signs, just a hand-painted wooden board nailed to a post that said, "Welcome to Eldorado. Still here since 1911. Daniel laughed at that and pulled into a gas station, where a teen with a sleeveless Def Leppard shirt pumped their gas while chewing sunflower seeds. Caleb wandered over to the vending machines and looked for root beer. He was halfway through selecting his drink when something caught his eye. A girl. She was across the street, near the corner of a boarded-up diner. Not moving. Not smiling. Just standing there in a white dress, holding something to her chest, a stuffed rabbit, maybe, and watching him. Her skin looked pale, almost blue in the heat. Her hair hung straight and wet-looking, even though the sun was bright and dry. Caleb blinked. The girl tilted her head. Then Daniel shouted, "Let's go," and when Caleb turned back, the girl was gone. He didn't say anything to his father. He wasn't sure what to say. They drove on, away from Eldorado, back into the emptiness. That night, they slept in a legitimate campground, picnic tables, a swing set, even showers. But Caleb didn't use the camera. He didn't feel like taking pictures anymore. The rest of the trip went by quietly. They reached Carlsbad Caverns and did the tour. The guide wore a vest covered in pins and made jokes that Daniel didn't laugh at. Caleb tried to feel excited, but something had shifted inside him. His dreams were strange. Sometimes he saw trees. Sometimes the girl. Sometimes she was closer. They got home in early July. His mother asked him how the trip had been, and Caleb shrugged. She didn't push. The Polaroids ended up in a shoebox with old birthday cards and broken crayons. The van was sold a year later. Life moved on. Or seemed to. Part 3, What You Don't Know You Keep. In 2007, Caleb Marin was 30 years old and working as a middle school history teacher in Council Bluffs, Iowa. He wasn't married. Didn't have pets. Lived alone in a small apartment above a laundromat, the kind of place that always smelled like hot lint and bleach. His life was ordinary. Quiet. Predictable. He taught the Cold War. He graded papers at night. He ate microwave dinners and forgot to water his plants. Every Sunday, he called his mother, and every Sunday she asked if he was seeing anyone. He hadn't thought about that trip in years. Not really. But then came the phone call. It was early March, cold and gray, and he was cleaning out some of the last boxes from his parents' house. They'd both passed away within 8 months of each other, and the place had been sold to a contractor who planned to flip it. He was halfway through boxing up old toys and magazines when his cell rang. It was his older brother, Mark. "Hey," Mark said. Random question. "You remember that trip you and Dad took when you were a kid? The one where you drove down south?" Caleb blinked. "Yeah. Why? You still have any of those photos?" Caleb frowned. "I mean, maybe. I think they're in a box somewhere." "Why?" "I found something weird," Mark said, his voice lower now. "I was looking through Mom's albums. There's a photo in there, one I've never seen. You're in it. Dad too. Sitting at a picnic table somewhere. But there's another person. A girl. In the background." "So?" Mark hesitated. "Caleb. She's right behind you. And she's looking straight at the camera." Caleb didn't say anything for a long time. "She looks kind of like you," Mark added. "Like a sister might. But we didn't have a sister." I know, Caleb said slowly. I know. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he dug through his own boxes, and sure enough, found the old shoebox with the Polaroids from 1987. Most were faded, the colors dulled. A few had stuck together. But as he flipped through them one by one, his breath caught in his throat. In the photo of the woods, the one he'd taken just before dusk, there was now a figure in the trees. Faint, almost part of the bark itself. But clearly there. A girl. Long hair. Pale face. Watching him. She hadn't been there before. He was sure of it. And worse. She looked almost exactly like him. Like family. Caleb didn't tell Mark about the photo he'd found in the shoebox. Not yet. He needed time to think. To understand. Instead, he took the Polaroid to work the next morning, slipping it into a manila envelope and stashing it in his briefcase between lesson plans. During lunch, when the staff room was mostly empty, he pulled it out and studied it under the fluorescent lights. The girl was faint, like a memory burned into film. Her hair looked damp. Her dress, or maybe it was just a long shirt, clung to her shoulders. One of her arms was slightly extended, as though she'd been reaching out. Her eyes, though indistinct, seemed locked onto his. And she did look like him. Not just similar, familiar. The same curve of the cheek. The same space between the eyes. She could have been his cousin. Or something else. He stared at the picture so long his coffee went cold. That night, after pacing the apartment for hours, Caleb opened his laptop and began searching for something he didn't know how to define. Unidentified children in photos. Apparitions in old family pictures. Urban legends girls in woods. Polaroid shows girl who wasn't there. The results were a mix of conspiracy blogs, ghost forums, Reddit threads, and amateur sleuth message boards. Most were garbage. But around 2:30 in the morning, his eyes locked on a phrase in a dusty GeoCities-style forum post. The Eldorado girl. Seen in photos since the 1950s. Always the same face. Sometimes with animals. Sometimes alone. No one knows her name. He clicked. The thread was barely legible, white text on black background, broken links, grainy uploads. One user had posted a scan of a photo supposedly taken in 1962 at a church gathering near Eldorado, New Mexico. The picture was black and white, all smiles and food tables. But in the back, almost out of frame, stood a thin girl in a light dress, half in shadow. She looked straight at the camera. Same posture. Same eyes. Same face. Caleb leaned back in his chair. The hair on his arms stood up. He didn't return to work the next day. Instead, he drove. He didn't know why. He just needed to. The drive from Iowa to New Mexico took the better part of 2 days. He stopped only for gas and bad coffee, his hands shaking every time he pulled the photo from his jacket pocket to check that it was still real. Eldorado, as it turned out, was harder to find than expected. The main road had changed, expanded, rerouted, and the old gravel path where the wooden welcome sign had once been was now half overgrown. He had to ask twice at gas stations before someone even recognized the name. An old man behind a counter of boiled peanuts and dusty beer finally nodded and said, "Eldorado? Don't hear that one much anymore. You looking for someone?" "Maybe," Caleb said. "It's about a photo. From 1987. The old man narrowed his eyes. "That's a cursed year, boy." "What do you mean?" "Bad fire. People left after that. Or vanished. You won't find many who remember." Caleb paused. "Do you?" The old man leaned forward. "You should go talk to Nora Blake. If she's still breathin'. Used to be town librarian. Lived on the edge of Eldorado, right near the tree line. She kept records. Wrote everything down. One of those women who didn't trust memories. Part 6, The Librarian's House. Nora Blake lived in a greenhouse with peeling white shutters and 3 ceramic owls mounted on the porch. When Caleb knocked, it took nearly 5 minutes for the door to open. A frail woman in 2 sweaters and long gray braids peered up at him with watery eyes. "I don't do church, no thank you," she said and tried to close the door. "I'm not church," Caleb said quickly. "I'm here about a photo." She froze. Her knuckles whitened on the edge of the door. "From Eldorado," he added. 1987, it might show a girl who wasn't there. Nora stared at him for a moment. Then she sighed, stepped back, and said, "Well, you'd better come in." The house was warm and smelled like cinnamon. Stacks of books lined every available surface. The walls were covered in maps and clippings. On a small table sat an old Rolodex labeled Eldorado 1910 to 1999. "You saw her?" Nora asked once he was seated. "I think so," Caleb said, handing her the photo. Nora stared at it, then at him. "She always shows up near families," she murmured. "Especially children. Always girls. Sometimes boys. She doesn't age. And she never speaks. Do you know who she is?" Nora didn't answer for a while. Then she rose, walked to a shelf, and returned with a thin, cracked journal. She flipped through pages filled with tiny handwritten notes. At one point she tapped a line with her crooked finger. "Unidentified female, first noted in 1951. Seen by 3 separate children. Described as a sister I forgot. She might not be real in the way we understand it," Nora whispered. "But she leaves traces. I've collected 8 photos in 50 years. Every one shows her with someone who later claimed to have a sense of her presence. As if she belonged." Caleb's hands trembled. "Why would she look like me?" Nora shut the book. "I don't know," she said. "But I've always wondered if someone, somewhere, once remembered her name, and forgot it again." Part 7, The One We Don't Remember. That night, Caleb stayed in a cheap motel off Route 55, across from a boarded-up diner and a shell of a gas station that hadn't seen life since the 90s. The room was musty, with faded wallpaper and a television that only showed static, but he couldn't sleep. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed and unfolded a worn map of Eldorado that Nora had lent him, marking places she'd circled: the burned-out town hall, the site of the 1987 fire, the old church, and a gravel pull-off near the forest's edge labeled Trailhead, Last Seen. Last seen. He didn't ask her who or what that referred to. He was almost afraid to know. Caleb stared at the map, then at the photo again. The girl's face, that odd, quietly familiar face, stared back at him. "A sister I forgot." That phrase had lodged in his brain like a splinter. The more he tried to ignore it, the more it dug inward. And then something strange happened. He remembered a tree. Not just any tree, but one from his childhood. A specific place, a tall, gnarled trunk with bark like folded paper. There'd been a swing. He was sure of it. And someone pushing him. Someone small. Someone singing. He couldn't see her face. But he could hear the voice, faint, almost like wind through a screen door. "Caleb and me, Caleb and she, climbing the hills and hiding the key." He froze. Where had that come from? Part 8, The Photograph That Wasn't. The next morning, he drove back to Nora's. She met him on the porch with tea already steeping and a small box in her hands. "I thought you'd be back," she said. "They always come back when they remember something." Caleb stared at the box. "What is that?" "Copies. Of photos," she said. "Ones I've collected over the years. Most from Eldorado." Some mailed to me from as far as Oregon and Minnesota. All with her in them. Though, she looked at him, not everyone can see her. He opened the box slowly. Dozens of black and white photos, curled at the edges, stared up at him. Family reunions. Campfires. Birthday parties. In every one, a group of smiling people, and somewhere in the background, barely noticeable at first, a girl. Sometimes clear, sometimes blurred, sometimes just the outline of her form in a reflection or a shadow. He picked up one from 1984. It showed 3 children on a picnic blanket. One was holding a sandwich. One was mid-laugh. And the third, the girl, was half-turned, her expression unreadable. This one, Caleb said, his throat dry. I've seen this before. Nora tilted her head. Where? He didn't answer. He wasn't sure. But he could feel it, something in his chest tightening. As if some part of him knew this photo, had been there when it was taken. Nora's eyes were sharp. Tell me something, Caleb. Did your father ever mention a girl? On that trip in '87? No, he said. Never. She nodded, as though she'd expected that. Sometimes it's like that. She's with you, but no one talks about her. Like a dream you shared but can't prove. Part 9, Mark's Journal. Back in his apartment, Caleb did something he hadn't done in years. He opened the storage locker in the basement and found the box labeled Mark, Journals and Notes. Mark, his father, had died 10 years ago. The journals had sat untouched ever since. Caleb had never really read them. His dad had been a quiet man, not prone to reflection. But during the last decade of his life, he'd taken to writing late at night, scribbles, entries, poems even. Most of them undated. Caleb carried the box upstairs and spent the next several hours flipping through them. For the most part, they were what he expected, records of teaching, observations about education reform, bitter thoughts about politics. But in a journal dated around 1987, Caleb found something odd. A page, half torn. No context. No title. Just a single paragraph. We saw something in the trees. She said her name was Liddy. She didn't want to come down. Caleb kept looking back, like he recognized her. But when I asked him later, he said he never saw anyone. And she wasn't in the photos. Caleb's fingers tightened around the edge of the page. Liddy. A name. She wasn't in the photos. But now she was. Part 10, The Box That Wasn't His. That night, Caleb dug out the original shoebox from the closet, the one where he'd first found the Polaroid. As he sifted through it again, something dawned on him. There were other pictures there, from the trip in '87. Most he'd glanced at, some he'd forgotten. But now, with the name Liddy in his head, he noticed something new. In 3 of the photos, there was a shape. A blur in the background. Not quite a person, not quite a shadow. In one, he was smiling on a rock ledge. In the background, a dress, caught mid-motion. Like someone ducking behind a tree. In another, he was eating cereal by a campfire. In the far left corner, a girl's bare foot, caught just at the edge of the frame. And in the third, a group shot with his dad and a ranger, there was a strange smudge over his shoulder, as if someone had moved right before the camera flashed. He'd never noticed these details before. Or, maybe he had. But had forgotten. Part 11, Back to the Pines. Caleb drove north out of Eldorado as the afternoon sun bled low into the horizon. The road twisted and narrowed into a single lane, the trees growing dense on either side like spectators to a forgotten memory. He passed the ranger station, long since abandoned, and reached the gravel turnout marked on Nora's map, Trailhead, Last Seen. He got out of the car and just stood there for a moment, trying to summon something from his memory. A scent. A sound. A voice. But all he felt was an inexplicable tightness in his chest, like something unseen watching from the trees. He grabbed his pack and started walking the trail. It was overgrown now, barely more than a footpath. Moss crept over the rocks, and the old wooden trail signs were sun-bleached and cracked, their letters illegible. He recognized nothing at first. But then, after half a mile, something shifted. He came upon a tree. Twisted and tall, with bark peeling like pages, the exact one from the memory. The one with the swing. The rope was gone. But the branch, that thick, low limb, still bore the indent where it had once hung. He reached out to touch it, and that strange voice returned, not in sound, but in sensation. Caleb and me, Caleb and she, climbing the hills and hiding the key. Where had that rhyme come from? It felt like something from early childhood. But his mind refused to place it. He stood there a long time before moving on. Part 12, The Hollow. The trail dipped into a hollow, and there, tucked between two large boulders, he saw it. A small, rusted tin box wedged under a flat stone. At first he thought it might be trash. But when he pried it open, he found something stranger. A set of Polaroids, old and faded, like the one he'd found at home, but these weren't landscapes or family shots. They were pictures of the same girl over and over, in different places. Leaning against trees. Smiling at the edge of a creek. Sitting in a sunbeam with her knees tucked under her chin. Her face was always turned slightly away. And on the back of one photo, written in a child's hand, were the words. Liddy. Third time here. Doesn't want to leave. Caleb's pulse quickened. Who had written that? He turned the photo over again. The date, August 1987. That was their trip. He stared into the trees, suddenly cold despite the thick summer air. Someone else had been out here. At the same time. Taking pictures. Part 13, The Notebooks in the Fire Tower. He climbed farther, following instinct now more than trail. The higher he got, the more familiar everything began to feel, though in a way that unnerved him. Trees he shouldn't remember. Turns he knew were coming. And then he saw it. The old fire lookout tower. Still standing, though the steps were half-rotted and the platform sagged dangerously. He hesitated, then climbed. Inside, dust coated everything. Bird droppings stained the walls. But tucked in the corner was a small canvas satchel. Inside the bag were two moldy notebooks and a rusted flashlight. He flipped open the first notebook and read. Day 2, she came again. Just watched from the tree line. Dad says not to talk to her, but she knows my name. The handwriting was young. A kid's. He flipped ahead. Day 4, she brought the bell. It makes no sound. But when she rang it, I forgot what I was doing. And later. Day 7, I dreamed I had a sister. I remembered her. But Dad says I never did. Caleb stopped reading. Because the name on the inside cover of the notebook was written in pencil, now nearly erased. But still legible. Caleb D. Warden. His own name. His own notebook. But he had never seen this before. He looked out the cracked window at the trees below. And suddenly, he wasn't sure which parts of his childhood were real anymore. Part 14, The Creek That Runs Backward. Dusk was falling. Caleb climbed down and retraced the trail, this time veering toward a small creek he spotted from the tower. As he approached, a strange noise hit him, a soft, steady hum. And when he reached the bank, his blood turned cold. The creek was flowing uphill. Not fast, just barely. A gentle current, climbing against gravity, shimmering with twilight. And there, on the other side, he saw her. The girl. Liddy. Not in a photo. Not a blur. But real, as real as the wind and the water and the shaking in his knees. She was standing barefoot on the opposite bank, in the same dress from the old pictures, her hair wet, her eyes locked on his. Neither of them moved. Then she raised one hand and pointed at something behind him. He turned, quickly. But there was nothing there. And when he looked back, she was gone. Part 15, Voices from the Past. Caleb returned to Eldorado the next day with a new sense of urgency. He decided to visit the town's small library, hoping to find some record or article about the mysterious events around 1987. The librarian, Mrs. Ellison, was a stern woman in her 60s, who seemed to know everything about Eldorado's history. When Caleb mentioned the name Liddy, her eyes flickered briefly, a subtle sign that he had struck a nerve. Liddy? Mrs. Ellison whispered, pulling out a thick folder from under the desk. Not many know the stories about her. Some say she was a child who disappeared near the forest. Others say she was never real, just a shadow left behind. Caleb sifted through the brittle newspaper clippings. One headline caught his eye: "Young girl vanishes in Eldorado woods, search continues." The article was dated August 1987, just days after his own trip with his father. His heart pounded as he read the description of the missing girl, age 8, last seen near the fire tower. Her name was Lydia Morrow, Mrs. Ellison explained quietly. She was the daughter of a local ranger who disappeared without a trace. Her father searched for years but never found her. Caleb felt a chill. Lydia. Liddy. Part 16, Meeting the Ranger. Determined to find out more, Caleb asked around and was eventually directed to an old man living on the outskirts of town, Thomas Morrow, Lydia's father. Thomas was frail but sharp-eyed, sitting on his porch surrounded by faded photographs and hunting trophies. When Caleb showed him the Polaroids from the tin box, Thomas's hands trembled. "I never believed those pictures were real," he muttered. "Lydia always appeared, like a ghost. We found traces of her in the woods, but she never came home." Caleb carefully mentioned the notebooks and the strange rhymes he remembered. Thomas nodded slowly, eyes moist. "She spoke in riddles," he said. "Said she was hiding a key. Said the forest kept her safe but also trapped her." Part 17, The Secret of the Key. That night, Caleb lay awake thinking about the key. What could it mean? A literal key? Or a symbol for something else? He reviewed every photo, every note, every scrap of memory. And then, in the margin of one notebook page, he found a tiny sketch, a simple shape, like a keyhole carved into a tree. He realized that somewhere in the forest, there might be an actual key or something symbolizing a secret passage. The next day, Caleb returned to the fire tower, searching for any signs of carvings or markings. His fingers ran over every bark and stone until, finally, beneath a layer of moss, he felt a groove, a keyhole, worn smooth by time. But the hole was empty. Part 18, The Shadow's Warning. As Caleb pressed his palm against the carved keyhole, a sudden gust of cold wind swept through the trees. Behind him, a rustle. A whisper. "Find the key, before the past becomes your prison." He spun around, but there was no one. Only the shadows lengthening as the sun set. Caleb's mind raced. Was it his imagination? Or something else? He knew now he was on the brink of uncovering something much bigger than a missing girl or a forgotten trip. Part 19, The Search for the Key. Caleb returned early the next morning, the forest bathed in a misty silver light. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and every sound, a crackling twig, distant bird call, echoed strangely in the stillness. He carried a small crowbar, gloves, and a flashlight, ready to pry open whatever secrets the forest might conceal. His first stop was the tree with the carved keyhole. He examined it closely, tracing the worn edges. Someone wanted to hide something here, he thought. He scanned the surrounding area, the underbrush, the roots, the base of nearby stones. Then, beneath a pile of damp leaves, his fingers brushed cold metal. It was an old, rusty key. Part 20, Unlocking Memories. The key was heavy and cold in his hand. It looked ancient, with intricate engravings twisting along the shaft. Caleb's mind raced. What did it open? His gaze shifted back to the fire tower, and a sudden impulse pushed him forward. Inside the tower's base, hidden under a loose floorboard, was a small metal box, locked tight. He slid the key in. It fit. With a soft click, the box opened. Inside lay a bundle of letters, yellowed and fragile. Caleb unfolded the top letter carefully. Dear Caleb. If you're reading this, it means the past has finally caught up. I never told you everything about that trip, about Liddy, and what happened in those woods. She wasn't just a girl, she was family. And the truth, it's more complicated than you think. Part 21, A Father's Confession. The letters were written by his father, in a shaky, hurried script. They revealed a hidden chapter of their family's history, a secret relationship with Lydia's family, a promise made in desperation, and a tragic accident that no one had spoken of for 20 years. His father confessed that during the 1987 trip, something had gone wrong. Liddy, the girl who looked like a sister to Caleb, was never truly there. She was a spirit, a memory, a piece of a broken past that had haunted his father ever since. The letters hinted that the forest itself was a kind of prison, not for Lydia, but for the truth, locked away to protect those who had been involved. Part 22, The Meeting. Determined to uncover the whole story, Caleb arranged to meet with an old family friend, Mary, who had been close to his father and Thomas Morrow. Mary's eyes were filled with sorrow as she spoke. Your father tried to protect you, Caleb. He thought if you knew the truth, it would destroy you. But Liddy, she was real, in her own way. And the forest, it holds secrets that no one wants to face. Mary handed Caleb an old diary belonging to Lydia, filled with childish drawings, cryptic poems, and mentions of a hidden door. Part 23, The Hidden Door. Guided by the diary, Caleb returned once again to the forest. The poems pointed to a specific rock formation near the creek, a place where the water flowed strangely, uphill. He found a narrow crevice, just wide enough for a person to crawl through. Heart pounding, Caleb squeezed inside. The passage opened into a small cavern, walls etched with symbols, a hidden sanctuary. There, resting on a stone pedestal, was a faded locket. Caleb opened it. Inside was a tiny photo of Lydia and his father, smiling, together, in a time that seemed both distant and impossible. Part 24, Echoes of the Past. Caleb sat on the cold stone floor of the cavern, clutching the locket. His breath came in shallow bursts. The flickering light of his flashlight cast strange shadows on the carved walls, symbols he couldn't quite decipher but felt pulsing with meaning. The photo inside the locket was worn, but the smiles on Lydia and his father were unmistakable. There was warmth there, a connection that defied time and tragedy. Suddenly, a whisper of wind stirred through the cavern, and Caleb thought he heard a faint voice, almost like a child singing a lullaby. His heart leapt. Was it memory or something more? He closed his eyes and let the song fill him. The words were simple but haunting. Find me where the fire once burned. Beneath the stars, where secrets turned. Part 25, The Fire Tower Revisited. Back at the fire tower, Caleb's thoughts raced. The fire once burned, could it mean the old campfire site his father had mentioned in the letters? The spot had been used by the rangers decades ago but had long since been reclaimed by the forest. Caleb searched through fallen leaves, snapping branches, until he found remnants of blackened stones, the old fire pit. He dug carefully near the pit's edge, and his fingers touched something solid, a small metal box, heavily rusted but intact. With effort, he pried it open. Inside was a bundle of papers, maps, photographs, and a worn notebook. Part 26, The Notebook. The notebook was Lydia's handwriting, clear, determined, but filled with childish urgency. She wrote about a hidden place deep in the forest, a door between worlds, where she had gone to find safety. The last entry was chilling. I am not alone here. The shadows watch. But I am brave. I will find my way back to Caleb. Please, remember me. Caleb's chest tightened. The girl who wasn't really there, was she trapped somewhere? Or had she crossed into something beyond understanding? Part 27, The Silent Town. Determined to find answers, Caleb went back to Eldorado to talk with locals. But the town had grown quieter, wary. People avoided his questions or changed the subject. Only an elderly woman named Mrs. Carlyle spoke candidly. They say the forest keeps its own time, Caleb. Some who go and don't come back the same, or at all. She handed him a faded photograph of a young girl, Lydia, standing by the fire tower, her smile bright but eyes full of sadness. Behind her, almost invisible at first glance, was a shadowy figure, a girl who looked exactly like Caleb. Part 28, Reflection. Caleb stared at the photo, disbelief and hope warring inside him. The girl in the photo, the one who looked like his sister, was real, in some way. But how? And why had she vanished without a trace? His father's letters, Lydia's diary, the hidden key, the cavern, the fire tower, all threads weaving a tapestry of secrets, love, loss, and mystery. Caleb knew one thing for certain, he was closer than ever to uncovering the truth. But some secrets, he realized, come with a price. Part 29, The Whispering Forest. The following morning, Caleb awoke with a restless mind. The photograph from Mrs. Carlyle weighed heavily on him. The image of the shadowy girl resembling him, standing beside Lydia near the fire tower. It was impossible, yet undeniable. He packed his bag with the notebook, the letters, and the locket, preparing for what felt like a pilgrimage back to the forest, a place that no longer seemed just a forest but a living puzzle. The journey into the woods. The dense canopy swallowed him as he stepped beneath the towering pines. The air was cool, filled with the scent of moss and damp earth. Caleb's boots crunched over the underbrush, every sound amplified in the eerie silence. He moved slowly, eyes searching for the landmarks Lydia described. He paused near the creek, where the water flowed against gravity, a strange, unnatural sight. The diary had mentioned it as a boundary, a threshold between worlds. Following the creek upstream, Caleb noticed something carved into a fallen log, faint symbols matching those in the cavern. The carvings led him further until he stumbled upon a clearing. The clearing and the old cabin. In the clearing stood a weathered cabin, long abandoned. Its wooden planks were rotted, windows shattered, but the door hung slightly ajar as if inviting him in. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and forgotten memories. On a rickety table lay a collection of objects, a broken compass, a cracked watch, and a bundle of dried flowers tied with a faded ribbon. Caleb's fingers brushed over the items, each one a fragment of a story. A sudden chill ran down his spine as the temperature dropped sharply. The voice in the shadows. A soft whisper echoed through the cabin. Caleb. He spun around, flashlight beams slicing the darkness. No one. Liddy, he whispered, his voice trembling. A pale figure flickered near the window, just a shadow, or perhaps something more. Caleb reached out, but the figure dissolved into the swirling dust motes. He sank into a creaky chair, heart pounding, and opened Lydia's diary again. Secrets in the diary. The diary was filled with cryptic poems, sketches of trees with strange markings, and references to the Watcher, a presence Lydia feared. One passage caught Caleb's attention. The Watcher waits where light fades. Between the branches and the shades. He guards the secret, silent and cold. Only the brave may break his hold. Caleb's mind raced. Was the Watcher a person? A spirit? Or a metaphor for something darker lurking in the woods? He folded the diary carefully, determination hardening in his chest. Returning to town. On his way back to Eldorado, Caleb's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind him. He stopped and turned. No one. Just the whisper of the wind through the trees. But the feeling of being watched had settled deep inside him. Back in town, Caleb sought out Mary again, hoping she might have answers. Mary's revelation. Mary met him at the local diner, eyes weary but kind. "There are things your father never told you, Caleb," she said quietly. "Lydia's disappearance wasn't an accident. The forest, it's older than the town, and it holds grudges." She leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. "Your father and Thomas Morrow were part of something, a pact, a promise to keep the forest's secret safe. But that promise came with a price. Lydia paid it. And so might you." Caleb felt the weight of her words pressing down on him. A new clue. Mary handed him a faded map, marked with strange symbols and locations deep within the forest. "This was your father's. It shows places no one dares to go." Caleb studied the map, tracing the path with his finger. One spot was circled, a place simply called the Hollow. The name sent a shiver through him. The night before. That night, Caleb struggled to sleep. The shadows in his room seemed to pulse and move. He clutched the locket, staring at the picture of Lydia and his father. Questions swirled in his mind. Who was the watcher? What was hidden in the hollow? And why did the girl in the photo, who wasn't supposed to exist, look exactly like him? Outside, the wind howled softly, as if whispering answers just out of reach. Caleb knew he was standing on the edge of a revelation that could shatter everything he thought he knew about his family, and himself. Final part, the hollow and the truth. Caleb stood at the edge of the hollow as dawn broke, pale light filtering through the towering trees. The place was eerily quiet, the air thick with anticipation. Clutched in his hand was the worn map, the diary, and the locket, his only links to a past long buried. His heart pounded as he stepped into the clearing. The ground was soft with moss, and in the center lay an ancient stone altar, covered in strange runes that glowed faintly in the dim light. The meeting. Suddenly, footsteps approached, slow, measured. From the shadows emerged a figure, older than Caleb expected. It was Thomas Morrow, the man his father had mentioned in his letters. Thomas's eyes were full of sorrow and something else, guilt, perhaps, or regret. "You've come far," he said quietly. "Your father and I made a choice here 20 years ago. We tried to protect this secret, but it cost us dearly." The secret of the hollow. Thomas explained that the forest was a gateway, a place where realities blurred. The girl in the photo, Caleb's sister Lydia, had slipped through that boundary during their trip in 1987. She wasn't lost but trapped between worlds, caught in the space where light and shadow met. The Watcher was not a person but a force, an ancient guardian of the forest's secret. It allowed passage only at a terrible price. Caleb's father had spent years searching for a way to bring her back but had never succeeded. The choice. Thomas looked deeply into Caleb's eyes. "You have a choice, Caleb. You can try to cross into that other world, to find Lydia and bring her home. But it is dangerous, and you may never return." Caleb's mind raced. Could he risk everything to find the sister he never really knew? Crossing the threshold. With trembling hands, Caleb stepped toward the altar. The air shimmered, and the forest seemed to breathe around him. He closed his eyes and reached out. The reunion. When Caleb opened his eyes, he was no longer alone. Before him stood Lydia, unchanged, yet ethereal, like a dream made flesh. She smiled, eyes full of love and sadness. "Caleb. I've waited for you." They embraced, a moment suspended beyond time. The return. With great effort, Caleb pulled Lydia back through the veil. They emerged into the clearing, dawn now fully breaking. The forest was silent, but the weight of years seemed to lift. Lydia was home. Epilogue, a new beginning. Back in Eldorado, life slowly returned to normal. Lydia's return was met with disbelief and joy. Caleb looked at the photo one last time. The girl who wasn't there was finally here. But the forest still whispered its secrets. And Caleb knew some mysteries never truly end.